Today I want to talk about a psalm that is super important to me because it is intimately connected to one of those moments in my life. The date is November 18th, 2012. I am a first year in seminary. I was the kind of student who put all sorts of pressure on himself to blow my professors' minds. I was the kind of kid who, I'm a first year in seminary, I can't even read Hebrew, and yet in my Old Testament class, I expect that I'm going to write a paper that's going to unravel some mystery my professor has never thought of before. That is how delinquent I was, delusional I was. It wasn't until later that year that a friend of mine was like, Adam, these people have been reading and working in this field for longer than you've been alive. Like, there's nothing you're going to tell them that they don't know. Be okay with that. But like I said, that didn't come till later. We are approaching finals season, November 18th. Thanksgiving is fast approaching. Thanksgiving is reading and writing week, right? They are so nice. They give us the week off of classes where we think I'm going to go to my family, but what they really want you to do is write your 20-page papers and study for finals. I'm stressed. The anxiety around me is building. I dealt with anxiety a lot in high school. For whatever reason, I didn't deal with it in college. It didn't come up in college. That first semester of my graduate studies, my anxiety levels began to rise once more. It became the kind of thing where I was having trouble sleeping. I was having trouble relating to my friends, to my wife, Lauren. I was having trouble. I was constantly in this state of anxiety. What I remember about November 18th is that I was having a particularly bad anxiety episode. And I called my pastor at the time, Ted Thomas, and I said, Ted, can I come talk to you? I'm dealing with some anxiety, and I feel like I need to talk to you. He said, yeah, that'd be fine. Do you want to meet at like a McDonald's or whatever? I said, well, can I just come to your house? He said, yeah. I said, Lauren, I need you to drive me there because I actually don't know that I can drive with how high my anxiety level is right now. And then the scariest moment of my life happened, perhaps the scariest moment of Lauren's life, you can ask her later, happened on the ride over there. I began to hyperventilate. Now, until that happened to me, I just thought hyperventilating was breathing fast. But what I discovered is that as I'm in the car, sitting in the passenger seat, as Lauren drives us to our minister's house for me to talk to him, my feet go numb. And then it creeps up my legs, tingly, prickly feelings. My legs are now numb. And then my waist and abdomen goes numb. And about the time my abdomen goes numb, my fingers start going numb. As you can imagine, I was already freaked out. I was already having a panic episode. And now I think I'm dying. I was afraid of dying beforehand. Now I think it's happening in the car in the suburbs of Johnson City, Tennessee. I remember that my hands locked up and I couldn't use them. And so like a dog, I pawed the cell phone out of my pocket and bumped it to Lauren and said, please call 911. By the time we got to Ted's house, 911 had been called. They were going to meet us at his house. But by the time we got there, my body was completely locked up. I couldn't move my face. I couldn't move my arms. I thought I was having a seizure. I didn't know what was happening. Paramedics get there, and wouldn't you know, by the time they get there, now there's emergency help here, and I begin to relax. My movement comes back into my arms and legs. They take my vitals, and they say, no, you look fine. I'm like, really? Fine? That's the word you're going to use for me right now? Like, I don't believe you. Long story short, they said, hey, it sounds like you had a panic attack that led to you hyperventilating. Follow up with your primary care doctor, and we encourage you to, figure some things out to solve this, which I did, and we're not going to talk about that today. But what I remember, the reason I'm telling you this story, right? I remember that I went into my pastor's house, and we were talking, and I said, I feel like a bad Christian because here I am. I've got a Bible degree. I'm serving in the church weekly. I'm helping lead, and I'm on my way to a master's degree of theology. And here I am, afraid to die. And he said, that's okay. Sometimes the best news in the world is the hardest to believe. That Jesus loves you. That heaven is for you. He said, let's talk about some of your spiritual habits. And I said, well, they're not as good as I'd like them to be. And that was when he gave me what I gave you last week. This practice of reading 5 Psalms a day that correspond with a day of the month. What that means, the reason that I can remember the date of this episode is because of this practice. Because I went home that night, I opened my Bible up to the Psalm for the 18th day of the month, and it was in that moment that I read these words from Psalm 86. Incline your ear, O Lord, answer me. I am poor and needy. Preserve my life. I am devoted to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you I cry all day long. Gladden the soul of your servant, for to you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call on you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my cry of supplication. In the day of my trouble, I call on you, because you will answer me. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and bow down before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name. For you are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Give me an undivided heart to revere your name. I give thanks to you, O Lord, my God, with my whole heart, and I will glorify your name forever. Great is your steadfast love toward me. You have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. O God, the insolent rise up against me. A band of ruffians seek my life. They do not set you before them, but you, O Lord, are a God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Turn to me and be gracious to me. Give your strength to your servant. Save the child of your servant girl. Show me a sign of your favor so that those who hate me may see it and be put to shame, because you, Lord, have helped me and comforted me. I told you last week that in order for the Psalms to have the most power in our lives, we have to allow ourselves to approach them from the edge of our lives, from the moments of our lives where we feel like we're in the pit. As I was reading that, could you hear how that would have encouraged somebody who just had a panic attack, who thought they were dying, who felt like their body is in the depths of Sheol and God raised them out of it? And here I am going, Lord, I was baptized at the age of 10 at Northwest Christian Church in Decatur, Illinois. I've served you my whole life. I went to college to study you. I hope to be a pastor. Where are you? Why are you letting this happen to me? And then, by the grace of God, look, maybe Ted knew exactly what the day was, and he knew that Psalm 86 was what I needed to hear. He's never told me that was the case. But I needed exactly what he gave me that day. I needed the exact words of the psalm for that day because they were exactly what I was feeling. Incline your ear to me, O Lord. Listen to me. But don't just listen, God. Answer me, because I'm poor and needy. Preserve my life. Be gracious to me. I haven't had very many pit moments in my life. I'm lucky. I'm blessed. My life has not been very full of deep hardship and deep sorrow. There are a couple times that I remember being pit moments. Getting the phone call that my grandfather had had a stroke and they didn't think he'd live through the night. That was the first time my new wife, Lauren, saw me break down and sob. And then about 8 months later, this panic attack, anxiety attack over my schooling and my soul. I mean, it all came to a boiling point. And this Psalm 86 has been one of those anchors in my faith life ever since. 11 and a half years. This psalm has been one that I return to because in it I am reminded of God's promise and care for me. I am reminded of the way that God came to me in the pit. While I was in the midst of it, God gave me Psalm 86. God gave me words to pray. And here's what I want us to understand today. That if you are in a pit, if you feel like my life is I am on the edge of my life, I am pulled thin, I am strained, I am stretched, I don't know where to turn, I don't know what's going on, I am overwhelmed. If you're in that spot in your life, there are words for you in the Psalms to use. There are words for you in the Psalms. The reason that I want you to read the Psalms is so that you can find the Psalms that become your anchor to God's promises. Because these Psalms were given to us. They are the words of humans to God that God has preserved that we may speak them along with thousands, millions, perhaps billions of Christians and Jewish people who have said them before us. I told you last week that in the Psalms, this metaphor of the pit, whenever you see I was in the pit or I was in the depths of Sheol, that is a metaphor that is being used in the Old Testament, in the Psalms, to describe somebody who feels like they are on the edge of their lives. If you have ever experienced a deep loneliness, you have been in the pit. If you have ever experienced abandonment, you have been in the pit. If you have ever experienced fear and just a sense of overwhelming anxiety like I described, you have been in the pit. If you have ever been given a medical diagnosis that is like, hey, we're not sure we can get this, you have been in the pit. If you have ever experienced a sense of powerlessness, you have been in the pit. If you have ever been taken advantage of, you have been in the pit. Maybe you are at work and you get passed over for a promotion that you've worked your life for, it feels like. That can be a pit moment. If you have been cheated on by a spouse or a loved one, you have been in the pit. If you have been used for the gain of others, you have been in the pit. There are probably other examples that you've got where you go, that feels like a pit to me. This feels like a pit to me. As we get older and our families get older and we begin to lose parents and siblings, we sit here and go, I think I'm in the pit. Look, you all know that The Princess Bride is my favorite movie of all time. The pit of despair is perhaps the most relatable part of that movie. Because we've all got a pit of despair somewhere in our lives. We've all got a pit of despair where somehow that we aren't killed outright, just years of our lives are taken away. Right? We've all got pits of despair. And see, the problem that I have as a pastor is that too often we encourage or we encounter people who are in their pits. We walk along the road and we look down, there's a pit, and we go, oh, look, so-and-so's in the pit. And our response too often to those people is just to repeat some kind of platitude that we know it didn't work for us, like keep your chin up. Like bro, I'm in a well. What do you mean keep my chin up? God's got a plan. I'd like that plane to be out of here. And instead of just coming to somebody and going, yep, that sucks. And maybe you don't like that I just said that up here, but the words of the scriptures are actually a lot more pain-ridden than that. I remember that the day that my great-grandmother died, I was in Florida with my great-grandfather. We had driven down to see him because Grandma had been accepted into hospice. My great-grandparents, I'm lucky to have known my great-grandparents. Not everybody gets to know them. I had a good relationship with my great-grandparents. The day my great-grandmother died, Grandpa had been with her. He came home after she passed away, and I remember he stood in the doorway, and he said, well, and then he used the S word. I won't say that up here. And before he could even sit in his pain, he felt the need to say sorry to me, the high school kid, and to my mom, and to my younger brother who was there. And we kind of all went, no, Grandpa, it's okay. Like, y'all been married 50 years. Like, that's the raw emotion of what it feels like to be in this pit, and it's okay for you to feel that way. And too often as Christians, we go, no, you can't say that. You can't feel that way. David is called a man after God's own heart. And here he is in the pit saying, God, I don't think you care about me as much as I care about you. That's what he says. We are given permission to be honest with God. We are given permission to weep and cry with God. We are given permission to come into the pit and go, God, this is not okay. It's not okay. We forget that Jesus doesn't just shed a tear at the loss of his best friend. We are told that he weeps at Lazarus' death. And he knew he was going to bring him back to life. Like, if you don't feel like you can weep when life hits the fan, I need to remind you that Jesus wept when he knew he was about to fix it. We're told that before his death, he sweats blood, and he's going, God, I'd really like a different way out of this. And here's what I want us to understand. We are given these words. We have been given permission to use these words and these emotions before God. God can take your pain. God can handle it. You see, you may remember a couple of weeks ago, I was preaching through 1 Peter. And we got to 1 Peter chapter 5. And we came across this verse. I've already, 7, thank you. Peter says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And what I'm trying to say is that I think too often the church has gone to people and said, hey, cast your anxiety on him, move on. And David's going, yeah, I'll cast my anxieties on him, but I'm going to do it for real. I'm going to go to God and go, here's my issue. I love you. It doesn't feel like you love me. I served you. It doesn't feel like you're serving me. I am in the midst of a pit of death, God. Where are you? It seems to me that sometimes in order to cast our cares upon God, we have to also bring our anger and our frustration and our sorrow and our angst. This is not a platitude. It'll be okay, give it to God. Bye. Now, hear me say, this psalm does not leave David in the pit. Okay? David, it seems, as he's praying this prayer, as he's saying these words, he's moving out of the pit. with God. He, in 3 different verses, verses 5, 10, and 15, he uses what appear to be kind of like belief statements about God. He says, "O Lord, you are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love. You, O Lord, are a God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. You are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God." You see, David, while he brings his frustration to God, is reminding himself what he believes about God. In some ways, I think he's going, "Hey, God, I am told that you are this kind of God. Be that kind of God for me today." You see, the point is that if you are in the pit of your life, if you are like 2012 Adam at the brink of what feels like death and you don't know where to turn, there are words for you in the Bible to express that fear and pain and sorrow to God. I want you to take that pain and bring it to God. Be honest with God, because God can take it. You don't make God lesser by being real with God. But you may just find what David found, that once we give our anger over to God, we can't experience the grace that comes from God. We can experience the abounding love. We can experience the steadfast love. We can experience the bountiful mercy. So if you're in the pit right now, you have my permission to go to God and be honest with God. When you see someone in the pit, I want to invite you to not just walk by the pit. I want to invite you, before you even try to get somebody out of it. You see, too often we see somebody in a pit, and the first thing we do is we want to go solve their problem. David invites us to climb down into the pit first. Climb down into the pit with them first. Climb down into the pit and be with them. I remember my freshman year of college, a good friend of mine, he got a phone call that his dad had been killed in a car accident. It was horrible. You know, here you are, 18 years old, your first semester away from home, and your dad is killed in a car accident. And I remember that one of the things that he needed from us was that we just sat in his dorm room. We didn't say anything. What do you say in that moment? Nothing. You just sit there with him. And you go, "This stinks. This is not okay. I'm sorry." About 7 years later, Lauren's grandfather would be killed in a car accident. There's no way I can solve that pain. You just sit there and you weep and you cry and you say, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." You see, I think what God is inviting us to do, those of us who are blessed to not be in the pit right now, he says, you have an opportunity to climb down into the pit with somebody and say, "I'm sorry that you're here alone. Let me be with you while you're in the pit. Let me cry with you." And when your tears run out, when you have cried so much that your eyes do not have tears anymore, I will cry for you. I will go to God for you. I will call upon God when you are too tired to do so. I will be there with you. And when they can't bear it anymore, when the pain and the sorrow overtakes them, I invite you to emulate one of my favorite characters in all of fantasy literature. Be like Samwise Gamgee, who, as Frodo with the ring, he cannot bear it anymore. He says, "Sam, I can't carry it any farther, and you can't carry it for me." And Sam then does the thing that makes me cry every time I see the movie. He says, "Frodo, Mr. Frodo, I may not be able to carry the ring, but I can carry you." And he puts Frodo on his back. And he walks him into Mount Doom. He says, look, I can't do it for you, but I can carry you. See, when we're in a pit, the reason that God has given us a community, the reason that God's people are always the people of community is because we're not supposed to be in the pit alone. When we're in the fiery furnace, a fourth guy shows up who wasn't there. We are reminded that Jesus has come into the pit, and he promises to lift us out of it. We can be people who lift each other out of the pits, but we do so by going into the pit with them. We get them out by being with them. It is my belief that in the midst of your honesty to God, he will reveal to you, just as he did to David, the coming salvation. But you have my permission to use this psalm, Psalm 86, as permission to be honest and raw and full of emotion before God, because he can take it and he is here for you and he wants to show you his love. I will tell you that something that for me, that was in the moment a very deep pit kind of feeling, has ended up being something that when I get anxious, when my anxiety starts to bubble up again, and I've had severe attacks since 2012, and I try to figure out why that is. When that happens, I can open my Bible to Psalm 86, and I can read the message that first gave me hope 11 and a half years ago. And when I encounter people who say, I'm dealing with anxiety and I don't know what to do about it, I can say, yeah, guess what? Me too. I do that. Let's talk. Let me share how I have been in that pit. You thought you were in this pit alone. Let me get in with you and show you how God has rescued me from it. Let us be people who join each other in the pit, who join each other in their sorrow, and who work to help each other out together. God in heaven, we thank you for today. God, I thank you for these words that were so life-giving to me. I thank you for the opportunity to share that story of your watch, care, and compassion for me. I pray, Lord, that it would comfort those who feel like they are in the pit. I pray that we would have eyes to see each other in the pit. I pray that we would have hearts of compassion, that we would be moved as Jesus was moved for the crowds, that we would not just walk by, but that we would get in the pit with them. God, I pray that we would see the people who are in the pits with us. I pray, Lord, that you would help us. I pray, Lord, that you would meet us in our pits and give us the hope of Jesus, who is there with us. It's in Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.